Hello, everyone. This is Joe Mersinger, Superintendent of Schools in Delanco. And tonight I have a data presentation for you from the 2019-2020 school year. This is required by the New Jersey Department of Education. And the presentation is for the board meeting on November 11th, 2020. So without further ado, let's begin. On this slide, I provided a summary of the state standardized tests that have taken place since 2013. What you'll see is there's a list of dates there when it comes to PARCC especially. And then as of 2018-2019, we transitioned into the NJSLA, which stands for the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment. And you'll see at the bottom in bold, it says 2019-2020. And NJSLA testing did not take place. So the test was not administered last year. That was per the guidelines from the New Jersey Department of Education. What is NJQSAC? So that was mentioned on the title card. NJQSAC is the New Jersey Quality Single Accountability Continuum. So it is the compliance monitoring system for public school districts. And so the NJDOE reviews various things that districts do, definitely instruction and program, which is what this presentation is based on, other areas of fiscal governance, operations, and personnel, but this presentation focuses on instruction and program. What we have here on this slide is the NJSLA English Language Arts grade level outcomes for 1920, which, as mentioned already, the test was not administered last year, but I wanted to make sure that it was documented that we have no data, that it's not applicable or not available for any of these areas for last year. However, we are still required to provide a presentation to the board about the topic of test scores and data. Also, for NJSLA Math, we have no data from last year. Again, the test was not administered. But I just wanted this slide here to document the fact that we have no data from that time period. So what kind of data will we look at? So we would look at local data from Delanco, from our district goals. So I'm not going to read this entire slide, but this slide is based on the student achievement goal for reading. And some details are given there. So for last year, for 1920, we wanted at least 72% of our students to be proficient in reading. And this was based on improving upon the goal from the year before, where we met the goal, and that was 67.42%. We fully achieved that goal. So we said, okay, let's increase that percentage to 72. And so the goal, the plan was for the goal to be achieved through various activities that are listed there. There's also a rubric given that basically helps us determine whether the goal was fully achieved, whether we made satisfactory progress, or there was little or no progress. All right, so let's move on from there. So let's look at the data for a minute. On the left in orange, you'll see there is reading data for November. This is based on running records, which are taken by teachers. It's a type of reading assessment. And so again, the goal is that 72% of the students would be proficient. And if you look at the data over on this left-hand side here, none of the grade levels are at 72%, although some are close. And then when we look at the data that was collected in February 2020, actually the green is indicating that all of these grade levels increased, and we had a couple of grade levels actually decrease. No matter what, the data is incomplete from 1920 due to the COVID-19 school building closures. So as of March, the school buildings were closed. We went fully virtual, and we were not able to collect the data in the same way that we normally would during a typical year. It was a very atypical set of circumstances, as I'm sure everyone remembers. So the instruction was different, the assessments were different, everything was different, and the district was definitely in a totally different situation and a challenging situation, just like every other district in the state of New Jersey and across the country. And so we did the best that we had. we did the best that we could with what we had. And, when it came to that, we didn't have running record data. I believe that's what happens when you go into survival mode that way, that, we were put into the virtual situation very suddenly, and we did our best to manage that for a number of months. And so, the data is incomplete. So we can move on from that. So we can talk about local data in regard to writing. So we had a student achievement goal in that area as well. And we wanted at least 70% of the students to be proficient in writing based on a writing prompt benchmark. So if we look at the previous year's goal from 18-19, when that was assessed and we collected all the data, only 64% of the students were proficient in that area, and we were literally 1 percentage point away from fully achieving that goal. So nevertheless, we said, okay, we want to improve upon that still and increase the goal to 70%. Again, the various activities and steps that we were taking are listed there, and so is the rubric for how this particular goal was going to be scored. So let's look at the data. If we look at the data from November, really what we want to focus on is this area here where it's score of a 3 or higher, because that's what we're looking to achieve when it comes to this goal. So we want 70% of our students a score of 3 or higher. And if you look at that column, I mean, there are not many students at all that are achieving that score of a 3 or higher during November 2019. However, if we move forward to February 2020, the good news is that anything that's in darker green shows that there was an increase in the percentage. Anything that's in red shows that there was a decrease in the percentage. So if we look again at this far right column of score of a 3 or higher, that's basically what we want to achieve, 70% in every grade level and in all areas. So when we look at score of 1 or higher, of course, many students are doing that. Score of 2 or higher, a good number of students are doing that. But score of 3 or higher, it's still fairly low numbers, with the highest being in the 40s. So would we have achieved that goal? We don't really know because we did not collect the data in May. The data is incomplete again because of the closures. And again, every district was facing the same challenge of addressing the COVID-19 pandemic and basically being in what I mentioned as survival mode to make sure that we were instructing children, making sure that we were accountable for them participating in learning. But a lot of the things that we would typically do, we didn't have the opportunity to do and couldn't prioritize at that time. So the writing goal remains incomplete. If we move on to mathematics, so we have another student achievement goal here where we wanted at least 67% of students to be proficient based on the benchmark assessments from our old programs, Go Math and Big Ideas. We now have a new program, which I can talk more about later. And then when we look back at 18-19, the goal was actually 80%, and we only achieved about 62%, so we missed by about 18%. So we definitely missed the mark on that. And again, the activities are listed there, the things that we were going to do to achieve that goal, as well as the rubric for achieving the goal. And moving on to the data, so again, we wanted it to be 67% by May. So in November, here's what the data looked like. We're in the 20s, we're in the teens, in all the grade levels, and that's very close to the beginning of the year. And when we move on to February, what we can see is grade levels in the 50s, 40s, some still in the 20s, but every single grade level showed an improvement in those areas. So that's actually great news. We don't know what the end result would have been when it comes to the math scores because, again, we weren't able to collect the data in May like we typically would because of everything that was happening with COVID-19. So again, this goal and the data remains incomplete as well. So when it comes to the data, it's important for us to reflect on it and ask ourselves, how are we going to use this to identify strengths and weaknesses in our program? So one thing that we did over the years was take a really close look at math, and that's why we've moved forward with a new math program for 2021. That was a data-driven decision as well as a standards-based decision because we wanted our math program to be based on the newest standards. And then another question is, how will we use the data to continuously improve our instructional practices? Now, this is more of a question for the teacher, for the classroom level, where a teacher is collecting data on students and asking herself or himself, how am I going to use this data to improve my instructional practices to help my students? And then another question too is we look at how are we determining programming such as basic skills or the gifted program? And although we still will make determinations about those programs, if we look at the data from last year, with a lot of it being incomplete, it's very difficult to use the goals data and the benchmark data for that type of decision. So we would look at other sources for that. So moving on, here are just some factors that we should consider when it comes to the scores that we have from last year, or even scores in any given year. All the factors related to the NJSLA, that's not really applicable for last year. We didn't administer the test. However, we are still implementing new state standards, the NJSLS, the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, versus the Common Core, where previously for a number of years, we were implementing the Common Core. We purchased programs and services based on the Common Core, and then it shifted to the NJSLS, where we started to purchase programs and services related to the NJSLS. So Common Core was linked with PARC. NJSLS is linked with the NJSLA, which is, it's all based on New Jersey, whereas Common Core was a coalition of states that came together and came up with standards. So we've moved on from Common Core, but in doing that, that creates challenges when it comes to curriculum development, purchasing materials, training staff, and so on, whenever the state makes changes such as that. Also, speaking of the state, I put on their unfunded and or underfunded mandates from the state, and these are numerous. So typically, we receive broadcasts from the state of New Jersey Department of Education telling us here are certain requirements, and sometimes that we're just told to do it without any additional funding or even without guidance. As we know, when it comes to what happened in the spring and the summer, there was a bit of frustration when it comes to the timing of the guidance we were receiving. But also, there are a lot of things that have been unfunded. Now, more recently, thank goodness, we've received funding in the form of the CARES Act and digital divide funds and other things. But there are many times when we are told that we need to proceed with certain mandates that are not funded. And what that does is it takes away funding from other programs that we would like to put in place. And then, of course, I put there the COVID-19 school building closures from March through June, and the district's goals data was not collected during that time. So that's a major, major factor in this situation. If you look back at the goals, maybe we would have achieved all of them. Maybe we would have achieved none of them. We can't be certain, but what I can say is that, that we had a plan, we had the goals, and we weren't able to carry it out because of COVID-19. There's some other factors to consider that I list and talk about each year. Number one, we have an updated curriculum based on the NJSLS. That's been mentioned already. Updated technology, for example, Chromebooks for our students, laptops for our staff, smart boards, other flat panels, bright links, and then PD, professional development for staff, highly effective instructional practices that our teachers have in place, highly effective supervision practices that Mr. Conti, Mrs. Noble, and I are implementing when it comes to supervising the instruction. And then leadership continuity, which is something that I've mentioned over the years, is that prior to my arrival in 2014, the district had many superintendents over a pretty short period of time. And so if we look at that lineage, it went from Joe Miller to Mike Livingood, I believe next to then to Walt Boyer, Bobby Benke, Cheryl Smith, and then me. So that's 6 superintendents in the span of about 8 years. And so that lack of continuity and the changes in leadership that took place at the superintendent role, at the principal roles, and so on, I do think that that had an impact on the district when it comes to many things, curriculum, policies, the resources that were being purchased, and so on. So, some of these factors that are listed are very positive, that, we had the updated curriculum, the technology, and so on, and leadership continuity. I see that as a positive as well, that we've had in our district for 7 years. This is my 7th year as superintendent. This is Mr. Conti's 6th year as the principal at Pearson. This is Mrs. Noble's 5th year when it comes to being an administrator here, first year for the Walnut principal position. We've also had Tim Allen as our director of facilities for many years. He was the supervisor of building and grounds prior to becoming the director. So we do have some longevity when it comes to the administrators in our district, and that continuity helps the overall program. And then we have other factors to consider. So one major factor that I've looked at over the years is student transience, movement in and out of the district. So to give one example, our current cohort of 8th grade students, the Walnut class of 2021, and I would say Riverside or BCIT, Holy Cross class of 2025, that group of students is, there were 85 students in this cohort if we count everyone from kindergarten through the current 8th grade year. But there are only 55 active students that are currently enrolled at Walnut. That means there are 30 inactive students that left the district at some point. And if we look at the data for each grade level and look at it over the years, we do see a pretty high rate of transience when it comes to the student population. And because of that, I believe that that has an impact on our ability when it comes to educating students and being as consistent as possible. So on one hand, we have things changing when it comes to the standards and our programs based on what the state is doing. But then at the family level, at the home level, there are families that move, families that they move in, families move out. And so that is also having an impact. That type of change that is taking place creates inconsistency in the learning. And that has an impact on the students' overall learning and their growth and their achievement. So that's just something that I've looked at over the years, and I mentioned it during this presentation. And at the same time, we have a number of families who have been in Delanco for decades and decades, and that's, there's a lineage there that goes back a very long time. But I also feel like the families like that, that have been in Delanco for a long time, again, they have experienced certain changes, such as the leadership changes, the program changes, and so on. So I think that changes can be very positive at times. I also think that sometimes if you're in a situation of too many changes and not enough consistency, it does have an impact on the academic program. All right, so looking at some more district level factors, we're always addressing the needs of every student, but there are certain groups that have more needs than other groups, and it's important to mention that these subgroups do exist within our student population: students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged, limited English proficient. So for the current year, we have 426 students enrolled. And when it comes to the different groups that I just mentioned, so for example, students with disabilities, it's 103 students. Economically disadvantaged currently is 120, but the number would be higher. We're waiting on many free and reduced documents to be completed. Typically, it's over 150 or sometimes over 160. And then limited English proficient. And there is some overlap. So there are some students with disabilities that are economically disadvantaged, or students that are limited English proficient that are economically disadvantaged, or and so on. I mean, there are various overlaps that exist with this group. So, and these are the 3 government recognized groups that are considered disadvantaged, again, based on the government's description because of different factors. And the students in these groups certainly do have an impact on our district's overall performance when it comes to academics, and have an impact on the programs that we're providing, which we can provide or sometimes are unable to provide for budgetary reasons. Or it's definitely a challenge. And so when it comes to students in these groups, we make every effort to provide for their needs. And at the same time, it's important to point out, though, that so that students in these groups, not always, but students in these groups are typically struggling when it comes to academics. And so that does make it more challenging for us when it comes to our district goals, or when it comes to the state standardized test and other measurements like that. And some other factors to consider. So student attendance, that's something that we've looked at over the years. We've frequently seen that students that are not in attendance at school, of course, that they're missing out on the learning, and they come to school and that they have to get caught up. Students being in attendance as often as possible has a huge, profoundly positive impact on their overall learning and on their achievement when it comes to academics. Staff attendance, I put that on here as well, because if there's a situation where a staff member is here every single day for the students, and I would say that class definitely is very fortunate for that, because there could be classes where a staff member has to be absent for various reasons. It could be medical issues, it could be personal matters, it could be all sorts of things where staff members are absent. And if that happens, it does have an impact on the learning that takes place in the classroom. So any staff member, when it comes to this topic, any staff member's attendance does have an impact, whether it's secretarial, custodial, nurses, child study team, teachers, instructional aides, administrators. And we all have that impact on students by either being present or not being able to be present for various reasons. Parent involvement, of course, this is something, again, similar to attendance, where when parents are involved in their child's learning, then again, it has a profoundly positive impact and on the student just overall. And when parents are less involved, it does not have that same impact. I read something the other day where it talked about how parents reading to their children is probably the most impactful thing that parents could do when it comes to helping their children learn, especially early on, when they're even toddlers or preschool and so on, being read to, reading with the children. That has a huge impact on a child's future learning and future success when it comes to academics. There are other factors that could potentially impact students' homes. I bring this up because there are families in this community that are impacted by all sorts of different issues, whether it's financial issues, whether it's psychological issues, DCP&P involvement, police involvement, and so on and so forth. Those things do have an impact on a child's learning and overall growth and development, and of course, academic achievement. And then one other thing that I put here for this year is the student level of cognitive development, or COGAT scores. So this is something that I actually haven't included in years past, but it's data that we've been collecting over the past few years. Students have been administered the COGAT, which is the Cognitive Abilities Test. So this is some interesting data that we've collected just for the past few years. So it measures a student's level of cognitive development compared to their peers. So for example, if your child is in 4th grade, your child is compared to all other 4th graders who have taken that particular test. And so that's why it's called norm referenced. So it's not based on state standards. It's not based on anything like that. It's based on how well is the child doing in comparison to peers. So the scores are given in percentile ranks. So for example, if a child is at the 99th percentile, that means that child performed better than 99% of his or her peers. So of course, if that number goes down, that means that the child is performing better than a lower and lower number. So let's say a child is at the 50th percentile. Well, then that child did better than 50% of his or her peers. but then that child also didn't do as well as about 50% of his or her peers. So kind of right in the middle there. So if we were to look at the COGAT scores, which I've included a table on this slide, and if we look at their current grade for 2020, that's what was included here on the left-hand column. Included some totals and some averages here. We have all sorts of numbers here when it comes to the different cohorts, different grade levels. So if we look at 8th grade, for example, 33% of the students scored very high or above average on the COGAT. But if you look at the 7th graders, the current 7th graders, it was only 17.6% of that group of students scoring in the above average or very high range. So this is just interesting data for us to look at, because depending on the grade level, depending on the group of students and the peers that are in that group, for a norm referenced nationwide test, it's interesting to see that this type of comparison. So I created the different columns, above average and very high, higher average, lower average, and then below average and very low. So when we look at the column in red, this is something that we do need to be mindful of, that we are going to have a certain percentage of students in every grade level that is struggling when it comes to their cognitive ability and when it comes to their learning, at least based on the data from this test. And then we look at the lower average, and we have 31.5% on average of our students. So if we add these two percentages and say, well, it's about 45% of our students are either lower average, below average, or very low, and that's a pretty significant amount when it comes to the results on that test. At the same time, if we look at higher average and above average and very high and add up this 33 with the 21, we get about 54% there. So it's interesting to see the different groups that we can look at when it comes to the COGAT scores. And what does this mean for students? We do look at this data when it comes to basic skills. We look at it for the gifted program because it's important for us to see a student's abilities in relation to their peers, but not related to state standards or anything similar. So again, when it comes to this data, it's something we've done for a few years. I thought it would be helpful to include it here just to see that each grade level has different percentages of students in different categories. So that's something that in education, we see that, sometimes a grade level appears to be very advanced when it comes to everything that they're doing, and many students are doing very well. And then you could have another grade level where many of the students are struggling and are not as advanced. It just depends on the group of students. So this is an important piece of data, at least for us to understand our different grade levels and groups of students. All right, so we are taking steps to improve our program, and we've been doing this for a number of years. So I've included a couple of slides here to indicate some of the steps we've been taking. So first and foremost is curriculum. We have developed all sorts of new curriculum over the years. Casey Noble and her teams of teachers have been working on that. We have standards-based programs for English, for ELA, for reading and writing. We have a new standards-based math program called Into Math for grades K-8. Standards-based report cards. We have a basic skills program that we're implementing at Pearson and Walnut. We also have a gifted and talented education program, which we have over the past few years revised some of the standards and revised some of the requirements for entry and making it more rigorous. But no matter what, I feel like we've taken some steps to truly improve the instructional program, especially when it comes to curriculum. And we also have a significant amount of professional development that every year is either offered or required and planned. And I think that it's important for us to include this because we have the greatest programs in the world. And if the teachers don't know how to implement, then that's not going to help us. So we need the teachers to have this training. And I'm sure the teachers would agree, the training is essential for them to effectively implement the programs. So we have ongoing training in ELA and math, reading and writing workshop, and into math as needed. I would say less so for reading and writing workshop right now, but into math, we had a training to start off the year, and we have ongoing training as needed for that as well. We've had staff members offer training sessions for Google, Zoom, and other technology components. We've had training sessions earlier in the year for trauma-informed classrooms, so that going back to the topic of issues in a child's home and different things that children are facing, that trauma-informed classroom, that training definitely is beneficial for teachers to understand that and know that there are children that are going through some very challenging issues based on what's happening at home with parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, you name it. There are situations in our community where students are absolutely struggling in those areas, and we do need to be mindful of that and be mindful of, like I said, the police involvement and the DCP&P involvement and other things that are happening for our students outside of the school. We have ongoing consultation and training for social emotional learning. We've been doing that for a couple of years. We continue that this year. We actually planned for teacher collaboration prior to the start of marking period 2, gave the teachers a few days to work together, come up with plans and ideas, seek assistance from administrators as needed, so that everyone felt ready to start the second marking period, which was the start of the hybrid program and the fully virtual program running alongside each other. We also had state required trainings provided by Public School Works. That's what we do annually. So if the state says a teacher is required to learn about a certain topic, such as bloodborne pathogens, then we provide that through an online service. And I've also been looking into free webinars provided by the Burlington County Professional Development Institute and the New Jersey State Bar Foundation. These are free services that can be provided to our teachers, and I've been sending emails saying that here are all the offerings. And also, one thing we're doing is exploring some training opportunities related to equity, diversity, inclusivity, similar concepts that really highlight some of the things that we've been working on with the DMA, Delanco Mutual Aid Group, in collaboration with them. So, and our counselors are deeply interested and involved in that topic as well. So it's something that we're looking into and exploring for future trainings. But again, going back to some of the challenges we're facing, I mean, we're still addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. We still have a very atypical system in place when it comes to everything we're doing. So the hybrid and the fully virtual, although we are doing our best to implement them, and I actually think that it's a well-oiled machine that we put together, that I'm very proud of what our staff members are doing and the parents are doing and the students are doing. Everyone's coming together to do it the best they can, and that's amazing to me. But at the same time, it's still very challenging. It's atypical. So when we say, well, we want to do these trainings, we only have a certain amount of time to get things done during a given school day because of the new schedules that we've put in place. So it's these are all things that we look at when it comes to providing professional development. Is what are the topics, but also, do we have the time to make this happen under the current circumstances? So also teacher evaluation. So a fully virtual program, just like I mentioned, it causes significant challenges in evaluating teachers. A hybrid program causes some challenges as well. So what we've done as administrators over the past few years is we've done classroom walkthroughs that are informal, classroom visits that are informal, and we also provide some feedback to the teacher. And then also official observations using the Danielson model, which we've used for many years. And it's an excellent model to see whether the teachers are effective in 4 key components. Also, the New Jersey Department of Ed is requiring districts to conduct official observations and evaluations for the current year. This is different from what happened last year, where the Department of Ed, because of what took place in March with COVID-19, said that all tenured teachers would receive NE for not evaluated for their summative scores. So non-tenured teachers were still given a score. Tenured teachers were not. So the evaluation was certainly different last year. And again, I've used the word atypical over and over again, and that's still the situation we're in. This is certainly not a typical set of circumstances yet, and perhaps we'll get there in the coming months. That's the goal. But no matter what, when it comes to teacher evaluations, we are still required to do them this year. It's just that things are going to look a bit different from years past. Also improving our program, so I put technology and facilities together. So we have one-on-one Chromebooks for students in our hybrid or fully virtual program. So any student, any family that comes forward and says that they need a device, we have a device available for that student, whether they're in the hybrid program or the fully virtual program. We also have hotspots for families in need. We just received those over the past week or so, and I've received information back from parents who are requesting them. They'll be receiving them over the next couple of days. We have Google Classroom being used as a hub by teachers. Teachers are using Zoom and Google Meet for virtual sessions. So I feel like we are definitely moving in the right direction with technology. As far as facilities, Tim Allen and his team have done a fantastic job with this. We've had MERV 13 filters installed recently for our HVAC system. And the facilities team, every day they're ensuring that everything is cleaned and sanitized. They're really at the front line for helping to prevent the spread of the virus. And they know this, and they take it very seriously. Hand sanitizer stations are available throughout the buildings. We've had rooms that we've redesignated as isolation rooms. And so I feel like we're taking many steps facilities-wise as well to ensure that we're managing the COVID-19 situation. And just some other improvements listed here, social and emotional training, as I mentioned earlier, collaboration with the Delanco Mutual Aid Group, as I mentioned earlier. We also have a school improvement panel, ESSA team, School Safety and Climate Committee. That's one group that comes together. It includes teachers, it includes other staff members, administrators, parents coming together to talk about different topics related to the school. We also have a district safety committee. So we work through a joint insurance fund, and they require that we have a district safety committee, and we would have one anyway. But it's important to just mention this because each year the joint insurance fund gives out awards for safety. One year we were the top award winner. We had one of our staff members, Karen Hosier, as the safety star. So we definitely take pride in what we do as a district safety committee. And that's something that's important, especially, I mean, at any time really, but especially now when it comes to COVID-19, that's a big part of it, is maintaining the health and safety of the buildings. We also had a reopening committee, as many of you are aware. We had a number of individuals participate in that and help with the planning and preparation for the current school year. We do have something that I think is really cool coming up soon, is the Special Education Parent Advisory Group. So I'm working on this with the Child Study team so that we could have regular meetings for parents of students with special needs to serve as an advisory group where we can discuss different topics. And I think that's an important step in the right direction. And just a couple of other things that I put here, that one thing that I believe in as superintendent and as a principal before that and as a teacher before that is an emphasis on growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So that's one way for our academic achievement to improve, is that, if we have a fixed mindset saying, well, this is all we can accomplish, and this is the best we can do, and that's that. That to me is very defeating, and that's not the way that I would like to think or have any of my team members, parents, students or anyone think. So, you know, I would rather promote a growth mindset that says that, you know, okay, you know, my child is not able to read yet. You know, my child is not able to understand this math concept yet, because that growth mindset is essential to education. That's why we're here. You know, the whole point of education is so that students will learn and grow and develop into uh, more proficient learners, but also into active and contributing adults in our society. So, I mean, that growth mindset is just essential. And I even when we look at the data and say, well, you know, look at the COGAT scores, look at the other data that we collect. I don't think that the data is deterministic. I think that that data means, well, that's a point where that student is when the test is taken. That doesn't mean that that student can never improve. It doesn't mean that that student couldn't possibly even have a decline in what they're doing. That, of course, isn't what we would want. But things change for everyone, including students, staff, and all of us. So when it comes to growth and fixed mindset, to me, it's essential for us as a school to know that the learning that we're doing is growth for everyone, for students, staff, parents, administrators, everyone, especially now. COVID-19 has really pushed all of us into a situation where we're out of our comfort zone and we're learning many new things. So there's been tremendous growth amongst all of us, I believe, because of that. So again, you know, one thing I've mentioned for years is new possibilities. I would like to encourage everyone out there who's listening to embrace and create new possibilities. You know, when I first arrived in Delanco, you know, one of the things that I heard pretty frequently was, this is the way we've always done things. You know, and that was in 2014. And it's been a number of years since I've heard that being said. And, you know, or I heard we've never done that before, and, you know, that type of thing. And that, again, that to me is more of a fixed mindset where, you know, this is the way we've always done things. Whereas a growth mindset would say, well, we need to be able to embrace and create new possibilities. So that's one thing that I'm very proud of when it comes to our staff and students and everyone involved is I see people embracing and creating new possibilities all the time, whether it's before COVID or now during the COVID situation. So I appreciate it, and I'm proud of that we're really creating some new possibilities, and that mindset of, well, this is the way we've always done things, which I think, you know, that to me runs counter to what we're doing as educators. You know, that mindset, I haven't heard that in the longest time, and I think that that's all part of growth. Is, you know, we need to move forward from whether it's long-held beliefs, long-held practices, resources, materials, curriculum, you name it. If it's something that needs to grow and change, then I think we need to embrace that and move forward with that. And so again, then we have the district motto and hashtag, nothing beats a dragon, hashtag NBAD, which we've had in place for a while. I know that at both schools that's announced every morning, and it's just something that you know, I would love to have all the students and staff and everyone here have that mindset of nothing beats a dragon. I mean, there are going to be things that try to tear us down. There are going to be things that do cause harm. There are going to be things that are the most challenging things we've ever seen, whether it's COVID-19 or personal situations, health situations, you name it. And that nothing beats a dragon mindset is one of courage and strength. And, you know, I appreciate it when I see it in our students, staff, parents, and everyone. So, you know, with that, you know, I'll go back to our title card. You know, this is the data presentation for 2019-2020. As you noticed, a lot of the data is incomplete. A lot of the data is not available. But what we do have is information about last year that we can look at and learn from that for the current year when it comes to professional development, when it comes to technology, when it comes to, like I said, being pushed out of our comfort zone by COVID-19. So there are some takeaways from this. So again, I appreciate everyone out there who has that nothing beats a dragon mindset, who has the new possibilities mindset, the growth mindset. And if you're not there yet, I appreciate you as well, because I think that maybe you're just one step away from being there. You never know. So I appreciate everyone again for listening. And that will conclude the data presentation for 2019-2020. Thank you very much.